All right, welcome to the All Sorts podcast. We are ready for another deep dive, and this time we are going to be looking at the Dassault Mirage 2000.
Ooh, the Mirage 2000. A classic.
Yeah, and a lot of people requested this one, actually. It seems like there's a lot of interest out there in this French fighter jet, and I can definitely understand why.
Makes sense. It's been a workhorse for a lot of different countries, and it's seen some serious action.
Absolutely. And to really get into the nitty-gritty, we've got some good sources lined up. Wikipedia, of course, always a good place to start.
Right.
But also an in-depth article from AirPra, which is really interesting. And for a more technical perspective, the War Thunder Wiki. I mean, who doesn't love a good War Thunder session, all right? And lastly, some insights from the national interest to give us a sense of, how this plane fits into the bigger geopolitical picture.
Sounds like we've got all our bases covered.
I think so. I'm excited to dive into this. So just to give everyone a little preview, we're going to be covering the Mirage 2000's development, how it came to be, what design choices went into it. We'll talk about its operational history, like where it's been used in combat, and different versions that have been developed over time.
Right, because like a lot of these aircraft, it's not just one static design.
Mm-hmm.
It evolved over time.
Exactly. So yeah, let's get started with the development. And I think it's fascinating how the Mirage 2000 actually kind of started as a bit of a backup project.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't like, the main focus from the get-go.
Not exactly. Our sources point to the Anglo-French variable geometry, the AFVG project back in the mid-60s. This was supposed to be this big collaboration between the UK and France.
Right.
But France ended up pulling out mainly because of the costs. And Dassault, the company behind the Mirage, went on to work on their own variable geometry design, the Mirage G prototype.
Okay, so that was sort of the initial path they were on. Variable geometry wings, like on the F-14 Tomcat. They could sweep back for high speed and then extend forward for more lift at lower speeds.
Right, but then the French Air Force comes in with a slightly different vision. They were more interested in a high-speed interceptor, something that could hit Mach 3. Like a pure air superiority fighter.
And the Mirage G wasn't really designed for that role.
No, it was more focused on ground attack. So Dassault, they tried to adapt and came up with this twin-engine design called the Super Mirage G8A.
Try to get that extra power.
Exactly, but this thing ended up being super expensive, like way more expensive than the Mirage F1.
And probably too complex for what they were actually aiming for at that point.
Yeah, the F-16 was coming onto the scene around that time, which was simpler and cheaper. And so the Super Mirage G8A got canned in 1975.
Okay, so what happened then? Like, did they just scrap the whole idea of a new fighter?
Well, here's the thing. At the same meeting where they decided to kill off the Super Mirage, Dassault, they come in with this new proposal, the Mirage 2000, a single-engine delta-wing design.
Wow, so they had a backup plan ready to go.
It seems like it, and the French Air Force was like, yeah, let's go with that. They ordered 3 prototypes right away.
Makes sense. They still needed a new fighter, and this seemed like a more practical solution.
Totally, and it was interesting, right, because they kind of went back to their roots with this delta-wing design, but they incorporated a bunch of new tech into it.
Yeah, like a throwback to the Mirage the Third, but with a modern twist.
Right, and the development from there was pretty rapid. They were manufacturing components at different places around Bordeaux and near Paris, and then assembling them in Bordeaux-Marignac.
Keeping all French.
Yeah, they were committed to that. The first prototype, Mirage 2000 ZO1, was actually built by hand, which is pretty amazing to think about.
Must have been a real labor of love.
It flew for the first time in March of '78. And get this, it hit Mach 1 without even using the afterburner.
Wow, so right out of the gate, it was showing its potential.
Absolutely. They later pushed it past Mach 2, so clearly the design was working.
But they didn't just focus on high speed. There's that famous demonstration at Farnborough Air Show later that year where the Mirage 2000 pulled off this crazy 25-degree angle of attack at just 190 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, I saw that footage. It's insane how stable it is at such low speed. Really showcases the benefits of that delta wing.
Absolutely. And then you had the second prototype that was lost in an accident, which is always a setback. But the third prototype, they used that for testing the weapon systems.
Right. And they even built a fourth prototype, a single-seater, incorporating all the lessons learned from the earlier tests.
So they were constantly refining the design, making it better.
And the first two-seat trainer, the Mirage 2000B, that flew for the first time in October 1980. So things were moving pretty quickly.
And then the first production model, the Mirage 2000C, that flew in November '82.
Right. And it was equipped with the Thompson CSF RDM radar and the Snecme M53-5 engine.
Okay, so that was the initial configuration. But then things get even more interesting in 87 when they introduce the M53P2 engine and the Thales RDI radar.
Yeah, that was a big upgrade. The RDI radar had a much longer range, 150 kilometers, and it could track targets that were flying lower than the Mirage, what they call look down, shoot down.
That was a big deal, especially with the Cold War still going on and the potential threat from Soviet aircraft.
Absolutely. And it could use the Matra Super 530D missile, which was a really advanced air-to-air missile at the time.
But this is also where we see the Mirage 2000s start to branch out into different specialized roles.
Right. You have the Mirage 2000N, which was designed for nuclear strike missions.
Carrying the ASMP missile.
Yeah.
A very different role from the original interceptor concept.
Yeah. It flew for the first time in 83 and entered service in 88. They built 75 of them.
Interesting, but they've actually all been retired now.
Yeah, I guess the strategic needs change. But the Mirage 2000D, which was developed for conventional attack missions, that one is still in service. It first flew in 91 and entered service in 95.
And they've actually built more Ds than NE's 86 in total.
Right, and they are still being upgraded today. So that shows you how versatile the basic Mirage 2000 design is.
Yeah, you can really adapt it to different missions.
But then, in the late 80s, they realized that the original Mirage 2000C had some limitations.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it wasn't great at engaging multiple targets at once, and its missile capacity wasn't as good as some of the newer fighters that were coming out.
Right, like the later versions of the F-16?
Exactly. So Dassault, they teamed up with Thompson CSF and started working on an upgraded version called the Mirage 2005. And they actually funded this development themselves.
Showing how much they believed in this design.
Yeah, they were pretty confident. And they had both two-seat and single-seat prototypes flying in the early 90s.
And this version was a hit internationally. Taiwan was the first to order it in 92, and then Qatar followed suit in 94.
Right, and delivery started in 96, so you can see how the export market was really driving innovation.
Absolutely. And the French Air Force, they also saw the value in these upgrades. They decided to upgrade 37 of their existing Mirage 2000s to the 2005F standard.
Yeah, it was kind of a stopgap measure before they could get the Rafale fully operational.
Right. The Rafale was their next generation fighter, but it wasn't ready yet. So the Mirage 2005 was a good way to bridge that gap.
And then you have the even more advanced Mirage 2009, which was specifically developed for the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah, that one had even better radar, avionics, weapons, and a longer range. Really pushed the envelope of what the Mirage 2000 could do.
And the last Mirage 2000 rolled off the production line in November 2007. It went to the Hellenic Air Force, and that was it. The end of an era.
Over 600 Mirage 2000s built. That's a pretty impressive legacy.
It really is. Okay, so we've talked about how it was developed, all these different upgrades and versions, but let's get into the actual design of the plane. What makes it tick?
Well, as I'm sure everyone's noticed by now, the most striking feature is that delta wing. It's what gives the Mirage 2000 its unique look and a lot of its performance advantages.
Yeah, it's a low-set, thin wing with a pretty steep sweep angle on the leading edge, like 58 degrees.
And a slight forward sweep on the trailing edge.
Right. And it's got 4 11s, which act as both elevators and ailerons, and 4 leading-edge slats. And one of the big advantages of this design is the large wing area.
Yeah, that gives it a low wing loading, which basically means it can generate a lot of lift for its weight.
Which is great for maneuverability, especially during takeoff and when you're dogfighting.
Exactly. And because the wing blends into the fuselage so well, they could fit a lot of fuel inside. Over 900 gallons. That's like 200 gallons more than the Mirage the Third.
Yeah, so it's got a decent range, too. Now, the fuselage itself, it's a pretty standard monocoque structure made of metal. And it's shaped using this thing called area ruling.
Yeah, area ruling is all about minimizing drag, especially when you're flying at supersonic speeds. They basically try to make the cross-section of the plane as smooth as possible, like the shape of a Coke bottle.
Right. And the landing gear is a retractable tricycle system made by Messier Darty.
With twin nose wheels and single main wheels.
Yep. And they could even add a tail hook or brake parachute, depending on what kind of runway they were operating from. And of course, it has a refueling probe for those long missions.
Yeah, got to be able to refuel in midair.
Now, those air brakes above and below the wings, they kind of remind me of the Mirage the Third.
Yeah, a little bit of a throwback there.
And that big vertical tail fin, that's important for control, especially at high angles of attack.
Right, like when it's really pulling those tight turns. And those little streaks on the air intakes help with that too.
And it's interesting how they use composite materials for some parts of the plane, like the fins and control surfaces,
Yeah, that saved them about 100 kilograms of weight.
which is always good. And delta wings can be a bit tricky to handle at low speeds, but the Mirage 2000 is actually known for its really good handling across its entire flight envelope.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with its relaxed stability design.
Relaxed stability. That sounds counterintuitive.
Well, it basically means that the center of gravity is a bit forward of the center of pressure. It makes the plane inherently more maneuverable,
Yeah.
but it also means it needs a fly-by-wire system to keep it stable.
So the pilot's inputs are transmitted electronically to these computers that control the flight surfaces.
Exactly, and it works really well. The Mirage 2000 can pull off some pretty incredible maneuvers.
And the flight control system, it actually has two modes. One for unrestricted operation when you're carrying air-to-air missiles and you need that maximum performance. And then a second mode with a G limiter.
Right, that limits how many regs the plane can pull when it's carrying heavier loads like bombs or extra fuel tanks.
So it protects the structure from getting damaged. Pretty clever.
Inside the cockpit, it's a fairly standard layout. Center stick, left-hand throttle. But it does have OTES controls.
HOTAS, that's hands on throttle and stick, right?
Yep. It basically means that the pilot can control a lot of the key systems like weapons and radar without taking their hands off the stick and throttle.
Yeah, that's crucial in a dogfight. And they use the SMB MK-10 ejection seat, which is a 0-0 seat.
Meaning the pilot can eject safely even if the plane is on the ground and not moving.
Which is good to know. And then in the later versions, like the Mirage 2005, they introduced a multi-display glass cockpit.
Yeah, that was a big upgrade for situational awareness. Pilots could see all their important information on these big screens.
Really modernized the whole experience. All right, now let's talk about the engine, the heart of the beast.
The SNECMA M53. It's an afterburning turbofan engine that was originally developed for the ACF program, which got canceled.
The avion de combat future.
Right, but the engine lived on. It's a single-shaft, modular design, so relatively simple to maintain.
And it went through a few different versions, the M53-2, the M53R5, and finally the M53P2, which is the one they ended up using in most of the Mirage 2000s.
That one produces about 65 kilonewtons of thrust dry, and with the afterburner kicked in, it goes up to 95 kilonewtons.
So it's got some serious kick, and of course the Mirage 2000 is armed with those twin 30mm cannons.
The DIFA 554, now known as the GIAT 30 550F4, revolver-type cannons, 125 rounds each.
And they can fire at 1,200 or 1,800 rounds per minute, so quite a punch.
Definitely not something you want to be on the receiving end of. And then for external stores, you've got 4 hardpoints under the wings and 5 under the fuselage.
So you can load it up with all sorts of bombs, missiles, whatever you need. And the Mirage 2005, with its upgraded radar, it can actually carry up to 6 Mica missiles at once.
Yeah, that gives it a lot of firepower. So we've talked about the design, the weapons. Now let's get into the actual operational history of the Mirage 2000. Where it's seen combat.
And naturally, France was the first to put it into service, July 1984.
Yeah, they formed their first operational squadron later that year.
And they ended up buying about 124 of the Mirage 2000C, so it became a real mainstay of the French Air Force.
And they've used it in a lot of different places. Like in the Gulf War, they were providing top cover for U.S. U-2 spy planes.
Right, high-altitude air defense.
And they also flew missions in Bosnia and Kosovo.
Right. But there was a tragic incident in 1995 when a Mirage 2000D got shot down over Bosnia. It was hit by a shoulder-fired missile, a 9K-38 Igla.
Yeah, that was a wake-up call. They realized they needed to improve the plane's defenses against those kinds of threats.
And then you have the deployments to Afghanistan, first in 2001 as part of the ISF, and then again in 2007.
They were mostly doing precision strikes with laser-guided bombs.
And they were also involved in the intervention in Libya in 2011, enforcing the no-fly zone. And more recently, in 2018, they took part in the strikes against Syria.
Right. And in 2024, 2 French Mirage 2000s actually shot down 2 Houthi drones over the Red Sea.
The first French aerial victory since World War II.
Quite a milestone. And they're actually planning to send some Mirage 2000s to Ukraine.
Yeah, that was announced last year. Training's already underway, and the first deliveries are supposed to happen early next year.
So the Mirage 2000 might be seeing some action in a whole new theater soon.
Now let's talk about India. They've been a major user of the Mirage 2000. They bought their first batch back in 1982.
They wanted something that could match Pakistan's F-16s.
Right. And they were really impressed with the performance of the Mirage 2000 prototype. They ended up buying 36 single-seat fighters and 4 two-seat trainers.
And they gave it the name Vajra, which means thunderbolt in Sanskrit. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that. And they became the first export customer for the Mirage 2000, taking delivery in '85. They actually considered building some of the planes in India.
With HAL, the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, but that didn't end up happening.
Right. They had some issues in the early years with engine overhauls and spare parts.
But they were committed to the platform. They bought ATLIS targeting pods, Matra BGL laser-guided bombs.
But then they realized that the ATLISDS didn't work so well at high altitudes, so they ended up getting Paveway 2 Buckas and Israeli Lightning pods.
Always adapting.
And they really put the Mirage 2000 to the test in the Kargil War in '99. They were using it to hit Pakistani bunkers with pinpoint accuracy.
Yeah, that really solidified the Mirage 2000's reputation in the Indian Air Force. They were even thinking about buying a whole bunch more, like 126.
But they ultimately decided to go with the Rafale.
Right, that was a big competition.
Yeah.
But they did buy another 10 Mirage 2000Hs in 2004, and they've been upgrading those to the Mirage 2005 standard.
Which they've designated the Mirage 2000 ITI. And those upgraded planes were used in the Balakot airstrike in 2019.
So there's still a very potent force in the Indian Air Force.
And Peru also bought Mirage 2000s back in '82, though they had to scale back their order because of money issues.
They ended up with 10 single-seaters and 2 two-seaters, and they started getting deliveries in '86.
They used them for combat air patrols during the Cenepa War in '95.
Against Ecuador, and they've been trying to keep them modernized.
Yeah, but they're probably going to retire them soon, maybe by 2025.
The United Arab Emirates, they've been big fans of the Mirage 2000. They placed their first order in '83.
36 planes. And then in '98, they signed this huge deal worth $3.2 billion for 30 Mirage 2009s and upgrades for their existing planes.
Yeah, they really went all in. And these Mirage 2009s are pretty advanced. They should have Damocles, targeting pods, Nahar navigation pods, the RDY-2 radar.
And a really sophisticated electronic warfare suite called IMUWS.
It's comparable to the ICMS-3 system. And they can even carry cruise missiles.
Greece got their first Mirage 2000s in 1985. They ordered 40, along with some F-16s.
And they actually had a Greek company, HAI, building the engines under license.
Right. And they got their first deliveries in '88. They had the ICMS Mk1 defensive system. And then in the '90s, they went through this big modernization program called Talos.
We got upgraded radars, better electronic countermeasures.
And they could use the Super 530D missile and the Exocet anti-ship missile.
So they really beefed up their capabilities. And then in 2000, they ordered 15 new Mirage 2005 Mk2s. And they upgraded some of their older planes to that standard.
Giving them the RDY-2 radar, ICMS-3, Scalp-E cruise missiles, Mica missiles.
They were really decked out. And they've had some tense encounters with Turkish fighters over the agency.
Right. Now, Taiwan, they bought their Mirage 2000s in '92 after China started buying Su-27s.
They wanted to maintain a balance of power. And they went for the Mirage 2005.
60 of them. The U.S. wasn't too happy about it, but the deal went through. They got Magic and Mica missiles, fuel tanks, Ealing T-pods.
The whole package. But their two-seat trainers didn't have cannons.
So they had to buy these external gun pods, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, not ideal. And they've had some problems with operational readiness and maintenance costs.
They even had issues with engine bleed cracks a few years back.
Dassault had to pay them compensation for that.
And they've been thinking about mothballing the fleet because it's so expensive to keep them flying.
Qatar bought 12 Mirage 2005s in '94.
They were replacing their older Mirage F1s. And they also got Mixia and Apache missiles.
But they didn't really use them much. They even tried to sell them to Pakistan and India at one point.
But nobody was biting. And they sent some of their planes to Crete in 2011 for the Libya operation.
Brazil operated a small fleet of ex-French Mirage 2000s from 2006 to 2013.
They called them F-2000s, mostly used them for air defense.
And then they sold most of them to a private French company called Trocor. They use them for aggressor training.
And there have been a few countries that almost bought Mirage 2000s but then backed out. Indonesia's a good example.
Yeah, they were really close to buying some ex-Qatari planes. They even signed a contract.
But it fell apart in 2024.
So yeah, the Mirage 2000 has seen a lot of action all over the world. It's a real testament to its capabilities.
Absolutely. Okay, I think it's helpful to just run through the main variants of the Mirage 2000 just to keep everything straight.
Sure. So you've got the Mirage 2000C, which is the original single-seat fighter.
Right. Then you have the Mirage 2000B, the two-seat trainer.
And the Mirage 2000N, which was the nuclear strike variant. That one's retired now.
Right. And the Mirage 2000D, which is still in service, the two-seat attack plane.
And they're working on a midlife upgrade for the D.
And then you have the Mirage 2005, which is a big step up from the C.
Better avionics, more weapons options.
And the French Air Force version of that is the 2005F.
And then there's the Mirage 2005 Mk2, even more advanced.
Yeah.
With the RDY2 radar and a glass cockpit.
And then you've got all the export variants. They're kind of lumped together under the designation Mirage 2000E.
But there are a lot of different subvariants within that, like the EM for Egypt, the HTHEI for India, the PDP for Peru.
The Manishli 5EI for Taiwan, the Manish 5 ETA for Qatar, the Nekna Dradad for the UAE, and the EGG MBG for Greece. So quite a lot of variety.
Shows how adaptable the basic design is.
As of late last year, the Mirage 2000 was still in service with Egypt, France, Greece, India, Peru, Taiwan, Ukraine, and the UAE.
Plus that private company in France, Procore, and Brazil and Qatar used to operate them.
And Indonesia almost joined the club, but they backed out.
Just to give you some basic specs on the Mirage 2000, let's take the 2000C as an example.
Okay.
It's got a crew of 1, it's about 14.36 meters long, has a wingspan of 9.13 meters and a height of 5.2 meters. The wing area is around 41 square meters.
And the empty weight is about 7,500 kilograms, but it can take off at up to 17,000 kilograms.
The internal fuel capacity is almost 4,000 liters.
And it's powered by that single Snecamo M53P2 engine.
And some of the key avionics include the Thomson CSF RDY radar,
which is used in the Mirage 2005 and the Indian Mirage 2000I.
And it's worth mentioning that the Mirage 2000 has even shown up in some movies and video games.
Yeah, it's a pretty iconic plane. It's captured the imagination of a lot of people. So I think it's safe to say that the Dassault Mirage 2000 is a real success story.
Absolutely. It started as a bit of a backup plan, and it ended up becoming a mainstay of air forces all over the world.
It's a really well-designed aircraft. That delta wing, the advanced avionics they've added over the years, the versatility, it's been used in so many different roles.
And it's still going strong in some countries. And now it looks like it's going to be playing a role in the conflict in Ukraine. So it's a plane with a rich history and a lot of potential still.
Absolutely. So here's a question for our listeners. What do you think the story of the Mirage 2000 tells us about how military technology evolves? You know, how do you balance proven designs with the need to keep up with the latest advancements?
Yeah, it's a constant challenge.
It is. And the Mirage 2000, I think, is a great example of how you can get that balance right. All right, well, that's it for our deep dive on the Dassault Mirage 2000.
A truly fascinating aircraft.
I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate it.
And we have a whole bunch of other deep dives on all sorts of topics, so make sure to check those out.
And you can follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads.
We're always posting new content and engaging with our listeners, so thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.